Hello. In this particular lecture, we'll come to the last part of my lecture, my series of lecture here, and which will be about editing. And as we know, in filmmaking, not a single person, he or she in the entire team can claim exclusive creativity, because it is like a army, a band of army which you require. So no single person is credited, to do the entire, responsible for the entire creativity of the film. So a film to be good, to be interesting, to be an experience, means like each personnel who's involved in the film, the cameraman, director, sound recordist, sound designer, editor, the actors, the screenplay, everything has to work in sync. It has to work creatively to create the filmmaking experience. So editing is one such thing, which was very early discovered, that in order to tell story, you have to sequentially arrange the shots in a particular way, and then only it can tell a story. So in that way, we can easily say that the development of film technique is the development of editing. Now, as we know, in the silent time, like if we take the period from 1895 to 1913, this period is silent era, a massive development had happened in the field of editing. Okay, the other technologies were also there, but editing actually went through, like in the American with Griffith, we have seen a continuity mode of editing developing. This was entirely questioned by the Russian school with Eisenstein, Pudovkin, Vertov. They brought into editing a different kind of grandeur, different kind of urgency, different kind of presentation. So all this actually happened in the silent era itself. Like, for instance, consideration for visual continuity that was developed very strongly with Griffith, and then it followed all over. There was development of parallel editing. There was replacement of real time by a dramatic time. There was a poetic editing style. There was the assertive editing theories of Eisenstein, of Vertov, and even the asynchronous editing style, which was developed by Buñuel, Vertov, all happened in silent era. So almost, the all editing repertoire was created that time. By the time sound came, like I said in my previous lecture, sound actually gave a fulfillment to cinema. After sound came, cinema became whole. Cinema took a birth as in its present form. But initially, the sound technology was very poor. It was there just to record, as I said before, dialogues. And that too, the processing power of this whole sound in film was, it is comparable to the processing power that we hear to the sound in the telephone now. It was that less, that down in quality. But there was a great improvement that came. And especially we say that in sound the improvement was much faster. It caught on very fast, because along with that the recording industry also started. So it became like now putting the sound and images together to make a expressive form, to explore a very expressive form, became the focus of cinema. And another thing also came back which gave a great push to film editing, that is the documentary. Film was telling stories, stories were enacted, but suddenly there was a urgency felt to bring the camera to real life, to see real people, shooting them, that time since the things are not in control. So the entire documentaries used to actually be made on editing table, because it wasn't like very organized shooting, because you have to go and capture reality in whatever form they are. But you had to come back and create the story out of it. For that, what was essential was the knowledge of editing in order to give shape to this mass of visuals, sounds that was coming in. So I will show one example of this documentary, which was made in 1936, and the film is very famous film called The Night Mail. It was produced by John Grierson, he was also termed the father of documentary, and it was directed by Basil Wright. And quite interestingly, it had, in those days itself, in 1936, a position called the sound director. And there were three named there: Cavalcanti, Alberto Cavalcanti, the poet Auden, and the classical British composer Benjamin Britten. Now let us see how their combination worked, in the last part of the film Night Mail.
This is the night mail crossing the border, bringing the check and the postal order, letters for the rich, letters for the poor, the shop at the corner and the girl next door, pulling up beat took a steady climb, the gradient's against her but she's on time. Past cotton grass and moorland boulder, shoveling white steam over her shoulder, snorting noisily as she passes, silent miles of wind-bent grasses. Birds turn their heads as she approaches, stare from the bushes at her blank-faced coaches. Sheepdogs cannot turn her course, they slumber on with paws across. In the farm she passes, no one wakes, but a jug in a bedroom gently shakes. Dawn freshens. The climb is done.
Down towards Glasgow she descends, towards the steam tugs yelping down the glade of cranes, towards the fields of apparatus, the furnaces, set on the dark plain like gigantic chessmen. All Scotland waits for her. In the dark glens, beside the pale green sea lochs, men long for news.
Letters of thanks, letters from banks, letters of joy from the girl and the boy, receipted bills and invitations to inspect new stock or to visit relations, and applications for situations and timid lovers, declarations and gossip from all the nations, news circumstantial, news financial, letters with holiday snaps to enlarge in, letters with faces scrawled in the margin, letters from uncles, cousins and aunts, letters to Scotland from the south of France, letters of condolence to Highlands and Lowlands, notes from overseas to Hebrides, written on paper of every hue, the pink, the violet, the white and the blue, the chatty, the catty, the boring, adoring, the cold and official, all the hearts outpouring, clever, stupid, short and long, the typed and the printed and the spelt all wrong.
Thousands are still asleep, dreaming of terrifying monsters, or a friendly tea beside the band at Cranston's or Crawford's. Asleep in working Glasgow, asleep in well-set Edinburgh, asleep in granite Aberdeen. They continue their dreams. But shall wake soon and long for letters, and none will hear the postman's knock without a quickening of the heart, for who can bear to feel himself forgotten?
In the production stages, the editor's job actually begins when the shooting ends. When the shooting ends, all the materials are put together and the editor has to assemble them, and with the help of director, producer, the entire work of the editor is actually giving a clarity to the whole thing and a dynamism to the whole thing. So that is his job. And when he's working in close collaboration with the director, producers to create that. So that is where the editor's job is becoming, it's not seen, because most of the time, we say that the film film is built in certain way that so the experience is one whole go, because you are not really sitting and seeing a film shot by shot. Later on, when we analyze the film, we see it shot by shot, but the impact is giving it a whole, that the entire experience should be one linear experience. That is what has to be achieved. So there it becomes a very important task. And as we know that the entire filmmaking process is fragmented. The shots we are taking is fragmented, the takes we are taking is fragmented, the sounds we are taking is fragmented. Now these pieces of fragmentation, making it whole, editor plays the most very, very creative part and very important part in that way. So any bad editing can ruin a film completely. So whatever good intentions of the director may be, whatever great shots you might have been taken, whatever great acting one has done, everything will be ruined if the proper rhythm order is not caught. Now, as we know, in film industry, everything becomes very quickly conventionalized. So there was a type of rhythm, there was a type of pacing which was set by these, American schools, the Russian schools, in a certain way, which dominated, which almost became the form. This is how film should be edited. And as we have seen this happening again and again, film industry is led by, definite conventions. So there are time and again people come forward and they challenge these conventions. So, the whole continuity editing, as you know, was later on challenged by the Nouvelle Vague school in France, like a person like Jean-Luc Godard, when he made a film called Breathless. So he actually used jump cuts. He was jumping from one shot to another in the same frame. But with the overall rhythm, it was working. So in that way, that also gave another sense for editing. So finally, what I want to mention here, and I want to take few sequences from one of the very important film in world cinema, which was made in India in 1955, that is Satyajit Ray's Pather Panchali, which was popular, as you know, all over the world. And that was identified, with something that India is a filmmaking nation and they produce work of arts. So it was recognized as a work of art all over. And it was a great inspiration for the Indian filmmakers to make films of world standard. So let us take one sequence from this film, and which is the very famous sequence of the train and the two characters of that film, Opu and Durga. Now in this particular sequence, we saw there was a gradual development. The pacing was little slow. If you go notice very carefully, you will find there was lot of awkwardness. Like Opu is just standing, turning back, looking for instruction as if, if you see the film silent, you'll see all these things happening. That there is, again, going by the continuity style, there is a big jump cut. We see the train actually coming from right to left in the beginning. Then when it cuts, it cuts the other side of the track and we see the train suddenly going from left to right, which was in that way a continuity jerk. But all these things were somewhere with the overall pacing and rhythm, this falls into a very memorable sequence. Wherever the film was shown, people were moved by this scene because of that. Although there are a lot of, in shot taking, there are a lot of defects, faults. But when they are put together by a experienced editor, in this case it was Dulal Dotto, that was his name, he really saved that sequence. He made something brilliant out of it. And in the script, it was something like a sequence was supposed to be made that the train was seen by Opu and not by Durga. And one visually did that, In a sequence, we just see Durga dropping, and after that she's not used. We cut back, and we see only Opu running. And in that way, the scene was built. So next in the round, I'll come into another sequence from the same film. Now, which was, if you see, edited in a very classical, tragic way, There is one particular thing we are guided by whenever we are making films, films are being edited, that is point of view. So, there are two people talking, so generally there is an over-shoulder shot, another single shot, and one edits a sequence like that, keeping the point of view, keeping clarity, and making it dynamic. So in this particular sequence where we see there is a nice exchange of persons, action and reactions all coming together with, of course, sound, that is a music, and a performance of these actors. Let us see this sequence. So here we see a very classical way of editing where different viewpoints have been established, the drum beats coming in at the same time, to drown the violence of the scene, making it maybe more violent. We don't know because we don't hear Durga shouting or they crying, but the Durga is being dragged and the entire thing is actually covered or drone. We don't listen to any other sound but the drum beats. And finally, when she puts her outside and shuts the door, then suddenly the sound stops, the music stops, which is the non-diegetic sound that was there, just stops and the real sound comes and we see these two women really crying on both sides of the door. And Opu is the person who's seeing it finally. It ends up with him. So that is where, you see the development and its climax almost in the same sequence and coming into a null, coming into a silence, coming into a settlement. That sort of pacing is actually done through the art of editing where the sound and images are coming. So in that way, it's a very important sequence once again, if we analyze and find about the power of editing. And another scene that I'm going to show, which comes in the film, actually, it comes after the train sequence. That is where Indi Thakurun is dying. Now, with Indi Thakurun, we know that she's this old aunt who actually has no place in the entire family. Nobody actually wants her, but she's just, she's there. She has to be there. She's a survivor. So she goes around and each time she's driven out of the house again and again. So right in the beginning of the film, she was also driven out. And when Opu was born, she came back. And once again, she's driven out and she dies all alone, sitting under the tree. And this is the very expressive use of sound, music, acting, direction, and all has come together to create this expressive sequence through the art of editing. So in that way, although this film was made 60 years ago, after that the art is still there. And especially nowadays, when we have come into the digital era, where things have become much more simple actually, because editing used to be physically done before that. You had to splice, you had to cut, you couldn't afford to get wrong, you could see it again and again. Whereas now, these processes have become very, very easy. One can cut as many times one likes, as many ways one wants. And that has perhaps made the whole art more available. And because it's so easily available, we may disregard it. But the idea is to pay much more importance to it now. Probably we can do much more precise job, which was not being able to do in those days. So they did it in a beautiful way and in a perfect way. So with that, I will end my lecture today. Thank you.